Shoshana.
And I'm Holly, and you're listening to Future Talent Talks, a podcast for early careers professionals that speaks about all things early careers,
Gen A to Z, stereotypes, social and societal trends, and everything in between.
Welcome back
to another episode.
All about, drum roll please,
all things ghosting, no-shows. I can never say this word. Reneges, kind of, you know, when people go back on, when young people go back on their offer. And we'll talk a little bit about why, and we're talking about this in a second. But yeah, that's what we're going to be talking about today. Holly,
yes.
Do you want to go through our chapters?
Yes. So again, we have, knowing us, got 4 chapters. First one, we're going to be giving a little intro and a overview of the current state of the job market from a young person's perspective, and also diving into a bit of the data around that. Chapter 2 is our perspective on the 3 things that we're going to be speaking about today. And chapter 3 is practical tips and strategies to prevent these things. As always, you know, chapter 4 is the homework chapter. So make sure you grab a pen and a piece of paper so you're ready for that chapter.
I guess just quickly one thing before we go into it, before we have our little catch up. According to data from this podcast, over 50% of listeners currently are not subscribed to this podcast. So if you're not currently subscribed, please subscribe. When you subscribe, it does one of 2 things. Number one, it lets us know that you're enjoying the podcast, but it also helps our podcast get recommended to more people. So if you are a regular listener and you have not subscribed on either Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcasts, please do go ahead and subscribe, and thank you so much in advance. So let's get on to a catch up, and then maybe let's get on to chapter 1. So I feel like I actually haven't seen you for like a week, and that's quite unusual for us. So how has your week been?
I know. So this week on Tuesday, I was with my client Naz Media, and I was at the National Apprenticeship Show. So that was really fun. I was doing some interviews with employers, so I've probably met a few of you actually there that are watching, which is quite cool.
Yes.
So yeah, that was really great, and also met some young people and just saw the different stalls that the employers have. Mm-hmm. Some of them have really high tech things, which is quite cool. What about you?
That sounds good. Oh, do you know what? This week, we're on Thursday now. It's not been that exciting. I think last time we had a catch up, I had loads of updates. And to be fair, I've gone really hard the past few weeks, the past few months. So it actually feels nice not have loads going on. You know, Holly, obviously, you know, and for those that follow me on LinkedIn, you may know that I'm looking to make some changes to my business. So I'm kind of really just mapping that out and figuring things out. There are definitely things business-wise which I'm not enjoying doing that I want to stop doing. There's definitely things that I'm enjoying doing and I want to do more of. And I'm kind of at that phase where it's feeling a little bit difficult and it's feeling a little bit hard. But that is where growth lies, I believe.
Facts.
So I'm just seeing it through and keeping going. And yeah,
nothing worth having comes easy, right?
Exactly. And I'm figuring things out, which is just normal. So yeah, not huge updates. It's just been a more chilled week, which is quite nice. So now I've had a little catch up. Maybe let's get into chapter 1 of this episode, which is going to be about all things, kind of the current state of the job market, and also some facts and figures on things like ghosting, no-shows, and renege. I can't actually say this word. It's a bit awkward that we've done this whole episode and I can't even say the word. Is it reneges? Reneges.
I don't know.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm just going to have to sound like an idiot if saying it wrong the whole episode. Apologies in advance. So
I think before we delve into it, I just wanted to give a bit of an overview of why we're speaking about this episode and what inspired it. So actually, I spoke to an ex-head of early careers at a global company last week, I think it was, off the back of one of our episodes. It was the rejection episode. And by the way, if any of you have any feedback, any comments, anything you want to speak to us about after an episode, please do get in touch. Whether that's through our LinkedIn profiles or our email, please get in touch, because we would love to hear your feedback, because then it creates new conversations like
not
this.
only their feedback, but like your thoughts. Like, we've got loads of great feedback, which is amazing, but to be honest, I kind of want some people to just be like, I don't agree with what you said, or you should listen to this perspective, because like you said, conversation creates change, and that's why we're doing this. We want to make change in the industry. So sorry, I feel like I interrupted you.
No, that was really great. Well, that's what sparked today's episode, essentially, and that's why I'm bringing this up, because this person gave an opposing view.
And by the way, we don't know if they want to be named or not. So we're not naming them. They haven't asked to not be named. We just didn't want
to. Well, this person gave a bit of an opposing view from the employer's perspective of our rejection episode. So they were explaining how frustrating ghosting can be from an employer perspective, and how they put in all this work with candidates, and then the candidates jump ship last minute, and they reject the employer. But how frustrating that can be from an employer's perspective, because they feel like young people don't actually understand the process to which employers are going through in order to go through this application process and get them to the end stage, essentially. So yeah, we thought this was really interesting, and so we wanted to provide a bit of how do you say it, sequel to that.
Yeah, we wanted to do a follow-on episode to not only discuss, this individual's comments, but also talk a little bit about from our perspective these things are happening.
Exactly. So yeah, hopefully that can help you in some way, put your mind at ease or whatever, because the chances are if that person and that organisation that person was at are going through those challenges, you probably are too, right? So yeah, that's basically the context.
Yeah, or you might just love a bit of a healthy debate. I know I do.
Exactly.
So obviously before we go into some facts and figures, I think it's really important to define what we're talking about here. So when we say kind of ghosting, no-shows, that can either be if, an individual has applied for a role at your company and you've got back to them about maybe an interview or next stage and you've not heard back from them, or it could be you've invited them to an interview which they've accepted and they have then not showed up to that interview. And then reneges, fingers crossed I'm saying it right, is obviously when somebody kind of goes back on their offer. So typically when you've given them an offer, they've either verbally accepted or they've signed a contract, and then they decide to kind of go back on that offer, usually because they have a better offer that's more kind of suited to them and their goals, or sometimes people do it to go travelling, or there's a variety of reasons essentially. So just to define, that's what we're going to be talking about today. Some interesting facts and figures from the ISC Student Recruitment Survey from last year. I know they're literally about to launch this year's one in about a week, and actually probably when this episode comes out it will be next week, it will be that week, but it's not out yet when we're recording. So in general, employers reported that 14% of their candidates overall withdrew from the process, and the average renege rates for graduates is 5%, and for apprentices it is 7%, which is interesting. So it was higher for apprentices. And then when it comes to things like offer rejection, graduates was 6% and apprentices were 8%. Okay, so apprentices higher again. And then kind of delving into it by sector, the charity sector had the highest graduate renege rates of 14%, followed by finance and professional services at 10%. And interestingly, Holly, I don't know if you want to go through this data point about the industry that had the highest apprentice renege rates.
The sectors that had the highest renege rate were retail, fast-moving consumer goods, and tourism.
Which was at 10%.
Which was at 10%, yeah. Interesting.
And also, finally, just another data point, which I thought was really interesting. In addition to that, according to a survey which was carried out over 1,500 people by Indeed, that survey apparently showed that 93% of Gen Z had confessed to not showing up for a job interview, and 87% have said that they had previously not even bothered to show up for their first day of work. However, with that said, I do think 1,500 people is a very small sample size, and in addition to that figure, it only mentions Gen Z, but there were 1,500 people. It doesn't mention the other age groups that are involved. But I did read that 75% of the whole respondents, so of all age groups, also agreed and said that they'd ignored a prospective employer over the past 6 months. So although it seems like the media are picking up on some of these facts and figures from reports, it's not a new thing, right? People have always not showed up for their first day at work. People have always ghosted employees. Yes, it may be more of an issue potentially. So let's talk a little bit about that really. And that's what we're going to do in
chapter 2.
Yeah, in our next episode. So yeah, chapter 1 was a short one, just going through some facts and figures. Let's move on to chapter 2, Holly, which is all about our perspective on why these things are actually happening. So I feel like this is going to be a long one. So let's get into it.
I actually I'm not sure if you was seeing last night. I think you were, but this was actually a topic that was coming up in the ISE group chat last night.
Yeah, it was.
I thought that was really important to bring up because it's showing how topical it is at the moment and how it is a bit of an issue, really. So yeah, we're going to be diving into that now in chapter 2. So, Shoshana, let's start with you then. Why do you think young people are ghosting and no-showing?
Well, I think first and foremost, one of the main reasons is potentially anxiety, right? The whole job searching process, the whole process of going for an interview and communicating with the employer can actually be quite scary for a young person who has never done that before.
Yeah.
And this is their first job. And there are actually a bunch of young people that I have spoken to before, and as much as they would love to and like to attend interviews, they have just been so incredibly nervous. There have been situations where I've spoke to young people and they've just not been able to mentally get themselves in a headspace to even do it. So as a result, they have just decided to no show at the interview. So I definitely think anxiety is a big piece, and we'll talk about tips and tricks, but I think a really key thing is removing as much anxiety from the process as possible, and that's definitely something employers can do, which I'll talk about in a second. So I think anxiety is definitely a big thing. Also, we did speak about it in the rejection email, but also the mindset of, employers do it to us, so why can't we do it to them? Obviously, humans of all ages like to feel in control of things, and when they're frustrated, they look to, okay, what is within my control? How can I control this narrative? So, yeah, if you are a young person that is constantly applying for jobs and is never hearing back, or is being rejected poorly, or is only hearing back after like a few months, you are going to be frustrated, and you are going to get to a point where it's like, do you know what? If these companies can do it to me, why can't I do it to them?
To move on from your point, to add to your point, I've worked with young people in the past that one-to-one in person that can literally not even articulate themselves because they're that like anxious and worried. So yeah, it can be so daunting, and to the point where they can't even speak, so they just think, well, what's the point?
No, literally, and I personally don't think like the pandemic and COVID helped with that, because there are literally some young people who haven't been able to come out of that. So obviously in COVID we stayed indoors for 2 years, whatever. And then obviously realistically, when you're at school and uni to a certain extent, you don't really have to socialise that much if you don't want to. You can easily just stay on your phone. You can easily just choose not to talk to people during the breaks. You can easily just choose not to contribute in class. And then when you get home, you can just choose to keep yourself to yourself, or play on your Xbox or PS5 or whatever. So for some young people, they haven't actually left that. So when it does come to things like that, it can actually be quite anxiety inducing, which I don't think employers necessarily always consider. It's not always done out of a rudeness thing.
No.
Or a malice thing.
Yeah, and I think from an employer's perspective, they could be thinking, well, why is that young person applying in the first place then? If they know they're not going to turn up. Well, actually, there can be a lot of external pressure for that young person. They feel like they have to start applying for these jobs, these roles, because parents, carers, friends, whatever, are saying, when are you going to get a job? When are you going to do this? When are you going to do that? And so they're going through your process, not because they want to, because they feel like they have to. And then when they actually have to show up, they're not going to.
Yeah, and also I don't think it's probably not that they don't want to. Obviously, I'm sure they do get external pressures, but they probably do deep down want to, because they know they need to do something with their lives. But I also think for anyone that suffers with anxiety or knows someone that suffers with it, it can be unpredictable. So, like, I sometimes struggle with anxiety personally, and like most days I'm absolutely fine, but I could just wake up one day and just be in a panic, not being able to get out of it. And I run my own business, so it's different now. I do just have to push through. Like, I can't just be cancelling a client because I'm not feeling it. I will always see things through, but anxiety is unpredictable as well. So they applied because they had every intention of applying. They wanted to come to that interview, but when it's got down to the last 5-10 minutes, that nerves and that anxiety could just be overwhelming. We just don't know.
Yeah, I think there are also, I know there are also young people out there that their anxiety or whatever becomes so bad that it actually stops them from wanting to do anything. So maybe deep down, like really deep down, they know what's good for them, but they would rather be sat at home playing the PS5 or whatever, doing things that are comfortable to them, but it is those external pressures.
Yeah.
I used to work at a youth hub, one-to-one, supporting candidates, and I used to have candidates that would just be like, I just don't want to, and they just had no external motivations. It was that scary to them that they were just like, no, like, I'm not interested. And it was other people that were saying to them, you've got to do this, you've got to do this. But yeah,
I think
it stems to anxiety.
and everyone's situation is so different as well, so there's no one size fits all approach.
Yeah, literally.
So I think definitely those two things, and also realistically, we all ghost, we all do.
Yeah.
It's so easy these days, whether it's someone like you're dating and you're talking to and you've decided that you don't want to get back to them. A lot of us don't, you know, have the heart to have that conversation or feel like we can have that conversation, so we just leave it. There's uncertainty.
That was one of my
employers,
points.
no offense, love you, but I've been ghosted by many employers that have said they're interested in my services. I'll invest time in putting something together. I never hear from you again, even though I follow up. A simple, we're no longer interested, or we've gone with someone else would be great. Salespeople, we all do ghost. We're all guilty of it, just because in this digital age it's so easy. You don't have to. You can just ignore someone and never speak to them again, and just keep ignoring them until they're right in front of you.
Yeah, exactly. No, I'm totally with you on that. I think having that conversation can sometimes be a little bit awkward, and for some people it might feel a bit confrontational, and you're having to say no to someone. That sometimes can feel a bit awkward. So yeah, like you say, we're all accustomed to doing that. Like, we've all done it in the past. So yeah, it's just coming from that with a more understanding perspective of sometimes saying no can be quite difficult for some people. And like you say, we're in that age now where it's just easier to just not bother.
Yeah, and I think also finally another one, and before we move on to reneges, whatever it's called, is kind of confidence and imposter syndrome. And that potentially could be a reason as to why someone maybe doesn't show up for an interview. If you've applied for a job that you had no intent, you never thought you'd even get an interview for this massive company, and especially individuals from underrepresented backgrounds where they, you know, throughout the interview process or on the, you know, they've not seen anyone that looks like them, those type of people are much more likely to experience imposter syndrome. And that could be another reason why people ghost and people don't show up, because they genuinely just don't have the confidence and don't feel like they get the job anyway, or feel like they're going to be judged, etc. So that's another thing I think we don't always think about either.
Yeah, and to add to that, especially with early careers, there's so many different opportunities out there that actually they're getting all this communication from other employers, and so sometimes it can be a bit of an indecisive moment. It's like, who do I go for? What do I go for? I don't really know what's best for me, because I've not really started out in my career, so I'm keeping my options open.
Yeah, which is their given right.
Yeah, exactly. But sometimes that can be a bit longer than it would usually be if it was like a job, because early career schemes the recruitment period is much longer.
Yeah.
So it can be a bit different. And then I also think it's important to understand how a lot of young people nowadays actually work more than one job. And that might be just for themselves, they want to earn more money, or they're providing for their families, or whatever it is. But they might have a bit of lack of commitment. If they're doing all these jobs and they're juggling all these things, it's like, okay, well, I don't necessarily know if I can leave all those things and just go to that one if I'm relying on all these multiple sources of income. So there's so many things that are adding to this pressure and adding to these decisions. It's not just, like you said earlier, it's not just like one size fits all. It's not just one easy answer. I
think another pain point tied to that one that I hear is, obviously, for a young person, this is their first job. For some of them, it's their first time interacting with, you know, large employers. And there have been situations where I've had people ask me questions on, like, I've been offered a job interview and it's at this time and I really can't do it because I've got my part-time job then, I'm just going to say no. And like a lot of the time they don't actually realise like there's flexibility in terms of things like interviews. They don't realise that they can go and say, you know, I'm working, can we do this date? Obviously if it's for an assessment centre, like it's a little bit different because you're bringing in a bunch of people, but I think they also don't realise that there is flexibility. So almost if you are someone with other commitments, you know, you almost just don't maybe just don't even feel like it's worth. If you've been given an option that you know you can't do, you know is when you're going to be working, you know you need that money, it may not even cross your mind to let them know, I'm actually working, can I have a... Because it really doesn't cross their mind. They don't think that's an option. They think that the employer's given me this time, I have to do this time, otherwise I'm not having the interview.
It's a great point. And on the flip side of that, sometimes they don't think that if they're at school, they could go to their school and say, would you mind if I take some time out to do this interview or whatever? Because with school, like, it's not shifts, it's all the time, right? So
I've had exams even.
Yeah. I've had young people come to me and say, I really want to go to this event or something that can't be moved. And they're like, but I've got school. And I'm like, well, go to your teacher and ask.
It's for your career. Yeah, and when I just said exams, I obviously didn't mean missing exams for job interviews, but I mean, like, during exam period, a lot of the time they're very like, this is during my exam period, I can't miss any school. Because obviously academics and exams and grades, they're so emphasised at school. But realistically, if this is something for your career, I'm sure you missing half a day of school exam revision, even if it is during, and I mean, ideally employees don't do things during this period, but sometimes things happen. Anyway, let's move on to reneges. So why do we feel like young people are going back on their offers after saying yes? Should I start with this one? Because when we were actually talking about this topic, I actually realised that I, don't hate me, but I was actually one of those people in my graduate job. I went back on my offer.
Tell us why.
So, just a little bit of backstory. I did a placement year when I was at university. I worked in Ireland for a tech company, loved it, wanted to go back for my graduate job. Like, that was always my goal. But the placement year that I did, it was like very unique. I studied marketing. There wasn't really a marketing department in Ireland, so I didn't know anyone in this office of this company. So I knew in my head that I wanted to go back there when I obviously moved back to England. But I kind of thought, there's not really that many opportunities. And that company had interns and placement years like in their UK offices, and they normally kind of prioritise those. So it was always my goal to go back. However, when I was applying for graduate jobs, I was not having any luck. Nothing was coming up. I was trying to utilise my connections at this company from Ireland, but no one knew anyone in the UK. So I started applying for other jobs, and I ended up having multiple offers at this point. And then when I was in the final stages of a job that I was actually really interested in, a job at my old company in the UK site came up. So I then was in the interview process for that job. I then got to job offer with this other job interview job that I was really interested in. And I asked them, I was like, thanks so much for your offer. Can I have some time to think about it? They were like, yeah, sure. I mean, at this point, I was still in initial early stages with the company that I had my eyes set on. I really wanted to go back to, and I knew that was like my dream company. And I was only in the initial stages. So it was either I lose that job offer and say no, but I have no guarantee that I'm going to get this other job at this company I really want to work at, right? So that was my choice. So I had to make a decision. I had to do what was best for me. So I said yes to that first company without knowing. I then went on and proceeded with the job interviews at the dream company, what I wanted, was offered the job. And then, of course, I was faced with this, okay, I've already said yes to this company. It's not an ideal situation. It's really not. And I don't recommend people doing this. But ultimately, at the end of the day, I 100% have to do what's best for me, right? I have to. So I decided to let the other company know that I'd received another job offer and I wouldn't be joining anymore. I completely understand there's frustration on employers' side. I get that. I know there's lots of work that goes into it, but ultimately at the end of the day, like, we all have to do what's best for us, right? And I remember I was having a conversation with my mum about it, and I felt so bad because I was like, is this going to make me look bad? Is this going to ruin my reputation? And she was like, look, Shoshana, you've got to do what's best for you, because employers will always do what's best for them, right? If they needed to get rid of you in 5 minutes, they would. So I completely get that it's frustrating for employers, but, if you're honest with yourselves, you would do what you have to do, right? But I wouldn't recommend it. So I just did what was best for me and what I wanted and what was aligned with my career. Would you have rather that I went for that job, which wasn't really what I wanted? It was a great job, said no to my dream job, and that's not, I wouldn't have done that, because that would be me trying to please that other company rather than please myself. So I do get that it's frustrating for employers, but also that's every individual's right to pick what they want. And I just think the comment, and obviously I wasn't in your conversation, so I don't want to Like, I really don't want to offend this person if they're listening, but I think the comment of young people don't know what employers go through and how frustrating it is, get that it's frustrating, but also that's giving me the vibes of, you know, that mindset of, well, they should be grateful that they've been given the opportunity anyway. Like, it's just been giving me that mindset, and it's kind of a little bit of an outdated mindset of, actually, there are like thousands of companies, and like realistically, your company is never as special as you think it is. So I keep saying this, but yeah, I understand that it's probably frustrating, but people have to do what's best for them. And the other employer, they were a great company. The hiring manager was great, and she was supportive of me. She was like, yeah, do you know what? Do it. Let's keep in contact. So that was why I did it. It wasn't easy, and I don't recommend people doing it. But sometimes, I mean, I wouldn't, obviously, if you're in that situation, I recommend doing what's best for you, but I wouldn't advocate doing it. I wouldn't advocate messing employers around, but at the end of the day, just got to do what's best for you, because they'll do what's best for them. I've seen all the LinkedIn posts of apprentices, literal 18-year-olds being made redundant. In fact, I had an 18-year-old in my DMs the other day who had not passed their 3-month probation and was in freaking panic mode. And it was renewed for another month. They did not have a great manager. They are not being treated great. And the way that they were just, the whole process, the way it was handled was horrible. So employers will always do what's best for them. So you always have to ultimately do what's best for you, in my opinion.
Facts.
That was the longest answer ever.
Oh my God.
So anyway, I just think, obviously, and I just think when it comes to reneges, there's a few reasons which we'll talk about in a second, but I think personally for me, the main one it comes down to is you ultimately weren't their favourite choice. Like, you ultimately weren't their top choice. And that's, you know, there's various factors, but that's potentially down to you, right? There's many things that can be done to make sure that you're top of choice, but ultimately it comes down to you weren't their top choice.
Ultimately, I think, one, thank God you didn't actually hire them and they were actually in your company before they did that.
What do you mean?
So, like, they just offered them the role and then the person's come back and said, actually, no, I don't want it. Is that what you're saying? So, like, thank God they didn't actually start in their job.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Okay.
So, ultimately, I think, thank God they didn't actually start in their job before the person was like, no, it's not for me, and walked away. And two, I think actually it's a great opportunity for feedback and to find out why someone is jumping ship. So instead of saying, oh, you know, why don't the young people understand how much effort we put in, or this is really frustrating, etc. I get it, but how can we convert this into an opportunity? Is my view, and find out why candidates are doing that.
Hey there, Shoshana here, just interrupting this episode to tell you about one of the main ways I work with employers. My training programs work with managers, graduates and apprentices to give them the support and tools they need to be confident in their roles. If my expertise sounds like it could be beneficial to your organisation, I'm currently booking work for the next few months. Head to my website at fairyjobmother.co.uk to fill out the contact form and enjoy the rest of this episode. That moves us on nicely to our next chapter, I think, where we're going to go into all of our tips and tricks. And I think this is going to be a long one because I
agree.
I've got lots.
Yeah, so have I.
Holly, want to get started?
So I wanted to speak about something that you sort of touched upon a little bit within your story, and it actually sparked an idea in my head. So again, I always do this. Bring the basic marketing principles when you're marketing consumer products into employer branding, right? So when you're marketing consumer products, services, whatever it is really, to try and get someone to buy something, you create an irresistible offer, it's called, right?
Oh my God, sorry. I was literally thinking about saying something along those lines because I'm
I got there first.
Yeah. No, because I'm reading the Alex Hormozy 100 million offer, and that's all about building an offer that's so good people cannot say no.
Okay, well, maybe
I'll let you continue.
I'll continue.
Yeah, go ahead.
You can add.
Yeah. No,
so
I was just saying, oh my God, but go for it.
Well, the irresistible offer, like Shoshana said, is something that makes it basically virtually impossible for someone to say no, essentially, right? So when you're offering, there's loads of things which we'll talk about in a minute that you can think about. But if you're an employer that is getting a lot of these, what are they called again? How do you say the word? Reneges.
people backing out on their offer.
Yeah, but if you're an employer that is getting a lot of people backing out at offer stage, is your offer that you're actually giving people irresistible enough? And are you actually telling people all the benefits? Are you actually telling them why this company that you work for is so great? Like, what is their benefits package? What did they get? What does that person get for signing up to your company? It might be the case that just saying to them, you get a free degree isn't enough. And because of all these other employers that are saying you get XYZ benefits, you get a sign-on bonus, you get this, you get that. And so these things need to be presented to these young people at offer stage. Don't expect them to just understand all these things when they're going throughout your process, because like I've mentioned before, they're getting fed all this other information from other companies. They probably got you a bit mixed up with some of the other companies. So you need to remind them at offer stage, give them like...
And before then, I think.
Oh, yeah, of course. But like at offer stage, give them some sort of document that showcases this irresistible offer. It's not just, here's the offer, you've got a degree apprenticeship, you've got a level 3 apprenticeship at this company, congrats. It's, you've got this, but also when you join, you get this, 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 and this, and this. So sign up now, whatever. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So again, bring the basic human psychology and marketing principles into employer branding. People want to know what's in it for them, so tell them.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree, looking at the competitiveness of the overall package.
Yeah.
Obviously highlighting things like salary, because realistically we are in a cost of living crisis, right? So salary is and has proven to be one of the number one determining factor for young people at the moment, especially for young people from underrepresented backgrounds, right? They need, they may come from low income some of them may come from low income backgrounds, some of them may need to be supporting family members. So if those are the people you want and they are backing out on their offer, maybe be asking yourself why that is.
Yeah, definitely. I also wanted to speak about a little bit before the offer stage. So another thing that is really important is to keep someone consistently in the loop. We've spoken about this on another episode about consistent communication, but I thought I'd just bring up as a little reminder just to show how important it is in order to keep someone's trust timer going. If you want more on that, go to our previous episodes. But if someone's developed trust over a certain period of time for a company because they've kept them in the loop, they've kept them informed, whatever, they're going to be more likely to think, right, this company has actually put a lot of time investing into me. Okay, fine, I'm going to stick with them. Maybe over a company that's even got a few more benefits, because they think, actually, this company has shown me a lot of dedication throughout this process and more communication than the other.
Yeah.
So sometimes it doesn't have to be all these crazy, like, benefits and a 5k bonus or whatever. It doesn't have to be that. You can stand out in other ways that don't necessarily cost you.
Yeah, and I think... Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, it's fine, go on.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree with the kind of trust throughout, but I also think that you need to be creating that trust way earlier, right? Because if there's an employer that has been, on your radar and you've built a relationship with, or you've seen coming into your school since like year 9, year 10, like whatever, then you're already going to have in your mind by the time you get to year 11, year 12, when you're applying to apprenticeships, you already know who you're applying for. And it's actually quite hard for other employers to overtake that, because that trust has been built. And yes, maybe for potentially consumer brands or brands that we all know and love, like the likes of Gymshark and TikTok or whatever, like, yeah, maybe for them it's easier, but we aren't all those brands, right? So how can you build that trust in other ways and start engaging way sooner? Because, year 12, college, that's too late, right? Second year of uni, final year of uni, that's too late. So it's how can you build that trust way earlier on, so that these young people already invested in you. They know they want to apply for you, and you've got your heart set on it. For example, you worked at Tesco. You were set on You were set on getting an apprenticeship at Tesco because you'd worked there for years. You trusted the company. You trusted the brand. You wanted to work there. If you would have got offered Tesco or Microsoft, I think that would have been a hard decision for you. And you may have gone for Tesco because you trust them.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
What would you have done if you got
That's
Tesco
such
or Microsoft?
a good question. Honestly, I think my family would have said Microsoft. You cannot not go for Microsoft, But yeah, I just love Tesco so much that it would have been a blooming hard decision. I don't know what I would have gone with. I really can't answer that.
Exactly. So yeah, I guess that definitely makes a difference. I guess some tips from my side.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've spoken a little bit about like assessing the competitiveness of the offer. And we've spoken a little bit about at the beginning, especially for ghosting and no-shows, really important to actually remove as much anxiety from the process as possible. So be super clear on timeline, so when they should expect to hear back from you, what to expect at interviews. I know some companies are starting to provide questions in advance. I personally really like that because, this isn't a memory test of who can memorize all the answers possible, right? It's the test of who can articulate themselves. So even doing things like sharing questions in advance or giving them...
Sorry, can I do a
Oh, not this debate.
No,
not
but
this debate.
I'm wondering, you're saying it's not like a memory test, but then technically if they've got questions, then they'll write out answers to those questions because they'll want it to be as perfect as they can, and then they'll try and remember that answer. So surely it's more of a memory test. Just throwing it out there.
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, you're right. But you're right. I think that's a fair point. But in general, doing things like sharing the interview questions, they remove lots of anxiety from the process. Because otherwise, for a young person that this is their first job interview, they have no freaking clue how to prepare for a job interview. They're going to go on TikTok, whatever, Google. They're going to see all these videos about all these different job interview questions. That's again contributing to that anxiety, because it's like, well, this interview is only 30 minutes or whatever. So if you can provide things and provide questions in advance or provide resources that help them prepare in an easy way for them to consume. Not everyone likes reading super long articles. Can we create videos? Like, can we make it funky? So I definitely think removing that anxiety from the process is so important.
I find that so interesting. Remember when we had a debate about that before?
What?
About providing the questions before the interview. I find that
God,
I'd love to know your opinion.
I feel like that needs to be a whole other episode, because Holly and I just had a really interesting personal debate about it.
We were like literally WhatsApping one day, wasn't we, about that whole thing, just having a debate about whether we think they should provide or not.
Yeah, I think it's good because it helps remove anxiety from the process.
Yeah.
And uncertainty as well, which helps people that suffer with anxiety. It helps individuals that are neurodivergent, etc. But yeah, maybe if anyone wants us to actually go into that, let us know.
Yeah.
And obviously, one key thing we're missing is obviously keep warm post offer, right? So there's loads of things that can be done.
I love that. Yeah, that's a really big point.
I think the main point is, how can you create and maintain that excitement from kind of offer to them joining? So I know some organisations already do this, but some do it when they start. But can you match them with a buddy or mentor before they join that they can meet with and build that relationship with before they join? So they already have someone they can check in with and keep in contact with, which is going to help them have that security and that excitement.
If they can build that interpersonal connection, they're more likely to form an attachment to it.
Yeah, exactly. Can you create like a community before they join? Maybe even on like WhatsApp, because obviously they're probably going to be on their phones where they can chat to each other. Lots of companies bring them into the office, which I think is great for just a little bit of fun and excitement. Can you automate tips, whether that be via email or send them on WhatsApp or whatever, with like tips and advice of how to prepare or how to get over nerves and things, just to again remove that uncertainty from the process. And actually that's just sparked my brain for another point. Lots of companies obviously bring them in kind of post offer stage, whether that be a barbecue, whether that be an insight day, whether that be a discovery day, whatever you want to call it. One of my top tips for that would actually be to let candidates know, like at the beginning of the process or at some point during the interview process, that you plan on doing that for candidates that are offered the role. Because one of my clients, I won't say who it was, I was having a discussion with them a few months ago, and they'd made offers and they'd had a few declines. They went and asked them why, and the candidate had said, because this other company is going to invite me into their office and do something fun, right? And my client also had that planned, but they hadn't yet sent the invite out yet. So that candidate didn't know. They assumed that wasn't happening because they hadn't received the invite. So they then declined that offer because they'd been invited to they'd already been to this really fun day. And little did they know that was already happening. And that was literally the reason they said why they declined the offer. So
well, there we go.
Let them know that those things are going to happen, because otherwise they may just assume other companies get there first. They may just assume they're not happening. So I thought that was actually so interesting.
That's going back to that part about the irresistible offer. Put everything in one box and send it to them saying, here's what you're getting.
Yes.
Not here's the offer, and then a few weeks then you're going to get that, and then no, all in one, give them that offer and go for it.
And I think in a way that's easy for them to consume, which is so key, because I don't know like how many, I've been doing workshops for like new apprentice starters and stuff and graduates, and I don't know how many of them have said that they didn't actually properly read their contract, or they don't properly look at their pay slips, or not everyone has parents and family members who have experience looking at job contracts. So even just meeting them on the level is really important. And finally, my final top tip, and Holly, I know you might have things to add to this, is, again, this is kind of a marketing principle. Personalise the experience and delight them, and give them little things along the way, especially post offer, to let them know that like they're valued and appreciated, right? So everyone loves a freebie, whether that's sending a little box of something to their house with like maybe general things they'd need, like notepads, pens, whatever, not when they join, but beforehand. But also, even, can you go that step further and personalise it? So for example, throughout the interview process or assessment centre, or based on the application, like, can you note little fun facts you've learned about that person? Then can you send them something nice, which is going to be personalised to them? BT, when I was doing their induction last year, obviously this was once they're joined, but I think you could do this like as a keep warm activity. At everyone's table they had a personalised dairy milk bar which looked amazing, but they also had like a nice like little photo of them, I think, on top of that, and that was like an amazing personal touch. And we all love freebies, but we also love those personal touches, right? Which is why, exactly, when it comes to marketing, those personalised Coca-Cola cans and those personalised like jars of Nutella, personalised things do so well because we just love them, right? So even just something personalised like that I feel like I'm saying personalised 10 times.
We're bringing basic marketing principles into employer branding. Again, this is what I do all the time.
Recruitment and just the whole process.
So again, this is adding on to what we're saying about the basic marketing principles coming into employer branding, recruitment, etc. So nowadays, right, when you're trying to sell to people, a lot of people do email marketing, or they'll do social media, whatever. And now putting a letter in the post or something physical in the post is now something that actually grabs someone's attention, because those things don't really happen anymore because we're so digitally focused. So again, putting that into what you're doing, that's going to grab their attention. That's going to make you stand out. Send them something.
That's so true. Even if it's just like a little handwritten letter, or maybe I appreciate you can't write handwritten letters like 100 people that you've just offered the job to, but even just a typed up letter that's been printed out and maybe signed by members of the recruitment team, or signed by a senior leader, or signed by the team that they're about to join. That's a really low cost personalized touch that just makes all the difference and will help them build that connection, that trust with you, and help maintain that excitement before they join.
Also another great tip, I actually got, when I joined my degree apprenticeship that I was on, got a box of different merchy bits, but the box was actually from the current apprentices at the company, which I thought was really great. So it wasn't even from the recruitment team.
That's so cute.
It just felt really nice. I can't really explain it, but
was
I
it
think
actually
that was
from the
genius.
apprentices, or did they just say
the apprentices actually built out this box.
Oh, that's so cute. Did they just do it for you, or did everyone was it just your team, or did everyone get that?
No, I think the whole cohort got that.
That's so that's brilliant. Exactly. So you can integrate your existing apprentices or grads into it as well.
Literally, it doesn't have to be high cost.
Love that. Okay, so I think we've given enough tips and tricks, and we're just brain dumping now. So, Holly, would you like to bring us on to our next chapter?
Hey, Holly here. Just interrupting this episode to let you know about one of the main ways that I work with employers. As an employer branding strategist, creating standout campaigns to help you attract new apprentices via social media. If this resonates with you, or you're interested, connect with me via LinkedIn and fill out the contact form linked in my profile. Enjoy the rest of the episode. So the next chapter is chapter 4, the homework and summary chapter. I think ultimately what we've spoken down today comes down to trust, really. What we've spoken about today comes down to trust, everything. It comes down to how much communication that person's had with your company, and how invested they feel in your process, and how much you've invested into them, and how much they can see that, essentially. So it all comes down to trust and their ability to also envision themselves in your organisation, feel less anxious about different things, etc.
Yeah, I would agree. Absolutely. It's all about building that trust from early on, and also making sure that you are consistently top of mind and you're their top choice. And that's not just there's many things that go into that. It's not just, you know, having a great salary.
Yeah, exactly.
Or having good benefits. The whole process is what matters.
Yeah.
So those are, and I guess in terms of activities and activities that people can go away and do. So I think one thing that might be quite interesting to do is conduct a little bit of a kind of audit on what you're doing. So maybe pick one of the kind of two problems we've spoken about today, whether that be ghosting or obviously people going back on their offers, and speak to some people. Number one, try and speak to some people, and I'd say offer them some kind of incentive to speak to you. So whether that be you're carrying out a focus group where you're going to compensate them for their time.
Who's the people you're speaking about, sorry?
The candidates.
Okay. So not current apprentices that have been through the process?
No, because they're already at the company. They haven't ghosted or gone back on their offer.
But there could always be something there where you ask them, what could I have done better? What could the team have done better? Yeah. Why did you choose us? Yeah,
that's great, but how serious is it going to be? How authentic is it going to be? They're an employee of that company. They're not going to be 100% honest.
Yeah.
So I think probably great to speak to existing employees, but also can you speak to some people that have actually ghosted you and have actually gone back on their offer? Because those are the real people. They're going to know the real reasons. That's who you're going to actually get the real insight in from, right?
But then again, it's like, well, would they even be authentic and honest?
Well, what do they have to lose? If they've got some kind of incentive, if they're going to be compensated for their time to join a focus group and they're going to get 50 quid for an hour of their time.
Yeah, like 50 quid Amazon voucher or something.
Why not? And if it's going to improve the process and if there's a genuine frustration on their part, they would want to share that. Would you not want to share that?
I mean, I would personally, but I just think if it's an anxious young person that has never really done that before, doesn't really know the reason as to why, like they're not going to be as in depth as we are, like understand
obviously, but we've discussed that number one, anxiety is only one of the reasons. There's a variety of reasons, right? It could be frustration, there's a variety, so it doesn't have to be a focus group. I'm saying it could be a survey which a young person just needs to click on a few answers and then they'll get a £10 Amazon voucher. I don't think it's good enough to just say, like, they won't tell us, we're just not going to do it. That's not an excuse. You need to try and speak to some of these people and find out what this is happening. You can look at all the market research data points in the world, but you're the only people you're going to hear the truth from, and potentially are the people that have been there and decided. So I do think it is important to speak to people. So pick one of those problems, try and speak to some people, 10-20% of those, and do a little bit of an audit on what you're doing based on their answers, what you could have done better. So I hope you enjoyed our little debate about our activity. Basically.
Also that, and then the part that I was saying about surveying or interviewing your current apprentices to find out why they chose your organisation, because then you can do more of that and less of the thing that you're finding out from the people that have rejected you. Yeah,
I mean, I do want to highlight, I personally think it's important to do both, because I've attended many events where, you you speak to your best apprentices. They're not stupid. They're not going to tell you. They're not necessarily going to tell you things you don't want to hear. They're in the company. They're not going to put their job on the line. I attend events where they only pick the best school students to speak, and it's just a narrow. So I think it's really important. Yes, speak to your current apprentices, graduates, early careers, but also you need to speak to those people who haven't had a good experience with you.
Do a bit of both.
Yeah.
I also think it would be great if you could map out your whole end-to-end process of attraction to recruitment and then keep warm. Map out this user journey. What does that look like? And then you can identify, okay, here's the journey, and then put the feedback into that and identify, can we add something? Can we take something away? Is it too complicated? So map out the whole thing, rather than a lot of the time there's separate teams for each process, and it doesn't really feel like sometimes that they're all interlinked and joined up. So come together, map out the whole process, and see how fluid it is.
Interesting. Okay, so you've got two potential activities you can pick from.
Yeah, 2. That just came to me just then.
Mine are holidays. Okay, so
do
that
them
brings
both.
us to the end of this episode.
Thank you so much for listening.
Yes, thank you for listening.
One thing we also wanted to add is that at the end of this season, we're going to be doing a Q&A episode.
Yes.
Where we want to answer all your questions that you've come up with over this past season. So if you could please drop us a note via our email, which is futuretalenttalks@gmail.com, our LinkedIn, whatever is easiest for you, even in the comments if that's easier, And we're going to put these all together and answer the questions at the end Q&A episode of the season.
Yes.
Thank you for listening to Future Talent Talks. For more tips and insights from me, Holly,
and me, Shoshana, sign up to our mailing list via the link in the episode notes and subscribe to the podcast on your preferred podcast channel. When you subscribe, it helps our podcast reach more people and ultimately helping more young people.
P.S. Don't forget to tune in next week, Monday at 12:30 p.m. for the launch of our brand new episode.